So let's just move right into questions. Go ahead, Rick.
Question for Alejandro. I follow a channel called Outspec Review. This guy named Kyle, he lives in Fort Collins, Colorado. Right? He has a lot of EV. He recently came out with a whole program of breaking your charge. Right? And so he is collecting data from all kinds of EV owners all over the country, reading your charge. And he basically has had several situations where you're on a long trip, you come to a collection of chargers and none of them are working, right? And so the integrity of the ability to be able to see ahead of time accurately, not falsely, of the chargers that are available and even the number that are occupied at any point in time. I suggest you might want to take a look at that on Spec Review and see where you rate. I know that's probably it's not very high, all right? But nevertheless, what are you doing to make that part of the charging experience avoid that kind of situation where people show up and there's no charge?
Well, that is a great question, and I'm glad you asked. Kurt mentioned in his presentation that establishing a good sense of ownership and propriety of this charging station is essential. It's a key factor to ensure that these charging stations will be well maintained and operated over the course of the year. So sometimes we have seen, even some cities are guilty of that, kind of early experience where they deploy charging stations, they deploy them out, and they offer free charging, and with the original intention to attract drivers, and actually that didn't work for many reasons. One of them is like nobody was responsible for the maintenance and the operation of these free chargers, and the second reason why is because once it is free, people were abusing them. People were parking and plugging in and never leaving. So actually the purpose of offering charging to as many people as possible was killed at that time. So we actually, the problem of charging stations that are not functioning and not being reported and actually out of service and frustrated people who get to that particular location with a strong need to charge and finding that the charging is not working or operating is actually, that's a big problem that is being addressed by a couple of systems. Well, first of all, you need, and as we pointed out during the presentation, a smart charging station that is cloud connected and is delivering to the entire driving community whether this station is in good operating conditions and whether it's available or being used by someone. And if that charging is working properly, you should be able to reserve your spot. So once you are working with the app and make a reservation, that spot is reserved for you if you're planning to get there within, let's say, 15-20 minutes, so nobody can cut you off. The second is working with companies that actually depend on the utilization is another key factor. Our uptime is over 98% because basically the only source of revenue that we have is actually people connecting, plugging in, and using these chargers. So if one of these charging stations is down, then we lose money, and actually it is a big problem, and actually it creates kind of people start complaining online. So it is aired, it is visible, it is transparent. So actually that damage our reputation. So we are, as a company, and other companies that are in the same field, each one of them is responsible for maintaining their own charging network. And also I would say the third part of that is being smart and choosing the right most durable charging hardware. We test every charger and every brand that is out there, but we don't work with all of them. We work with a selected group of charging stations that have proven to be durable, that withstand the elements. Some of them have been through hurricanes, and actually we turn them off like the night before the arrival of the storm to ensure that all the electronics won't blow up or burn with powered heights. And we turn them back on the moment we have electricity after the storm. But they are there in good shape. We were lucky. A couple of them, three fell pretty close to the station, but nothing happened. And actually, they continue being in good operating conditions. There are many other brands that I will not mention that we never use because of exactly those same problems that you're mentioning, that they damage, they get off service, they lose connectivity. Actually, they are supposed to be smart, but they get off connection like so many times with so high frequency that actually happens the problem that you are describing. So there is a lot of learning in the process of expanding the network in terms of brand and selection of equipment and the companies that actually are seriously involved in maintaining and operating these charging assets.
Any other, go ahead.
I stole it. So when the earlier question, when you ask who isn't an EV participant yet, I'm one of those folks, and there's a number of reasons. Mainly, my wife and I have 2 cars that are paid for, very low mileage. I don't really want to hop into, spending $100,000 on a Tesla right now. But my question kind of centers around, I always see the fuel cost versus, power consumption versus like the graph that was up there. What's the total cost of ownership though, when you look at a vehicle? And I maintain and keep my vehicles for a long time, right? So I'm going to have to replace a battery. I'm going to, how does that factor in? And then the other part is emergent services, right? I drove over from Tampa this morning, an hour-and-a-half trip, took me almost 2 hours and 45 minutes to get here. So what if I get in a situation where I've misjudged or made a mistake? What options are available out there?
Right, so I'll provide a little experience as a Tesla owner. It's one model. There's many out there, and I'm sure Glenn will have some other observations. In terms of maintenance costs, it's zero. There's no oil to change. There's really no parts to fix. The biggest problem I have is we had a busted windshield, and we've had to replace tires at least 4 times because every roof in my neighborhood is getting rebuilt. So I keep hitting nails. The tires are really expensive. That's the biggest problem. Still use those rubber tires. In terms of charging costs, when I charge at home, I think it's our rate is like 11 cents per kilowatt hour, so it's like $5 to charge overnight. If I do a supercharger stop, it's going to be between $10 to $20, I'd say, maybe average around $15, and then it'll take me a couple hundred extra miles. So other than the cost of tires, which I'm still really upset about, you don't have to go and get your oil change, any kind of maintenance like that. Now, Glenn, if you want to share some experience. Glenn has a lot of cars, by the way. So,
back in the day, we actually owned a black car fleet with the National Limousine Association, and we were transitioning a lot of the operators out there away from fossil fuel vehicles, the Escalades and that type of stuff, over to Tesla's brand at the time. And so we did an actual case study. And we found that we were burning about $600 per vehicle per month in fossil fuels. Well, when we switched over to the Model S, Model X at the time, because there was no Model 3 yet. By the way, the Model 3 cost is down under $40,000. We did have a lot of expense with the tires. I will tell you that straight up front, because the torque of the electric motors, you do burn more tires. We're in Florida. Roads are hotter. It happens. But when you extrapolate those costs over a 5-year time period, because in the black car industry, you have to migrate out of that vehicle required by Uber, by Lyft, by Black Lane. There's other providers out there that we can actually pump the data in from the geofence of the airport to execute those drives and collect the data. But when you extrapolate it over 5 years, we actually reduced our maintenance and cost of fuel by 2/3. Because we're running these vehicles on 1, 2, and 3 shifts. And then on top of that, we didn't have the downtime associated with bringing that vehicle out of the rotation and putting it into the maintenance shop. In the busing industry, which I was a motor coach operator, hundreds of vehicles. I was board director for the Motor Coach and the Limousine Association for many years while I was doing lobbying in DC. We found when you're not also paying for the diesel fuel surcharge or the DEF systems on top of that, these are add-on type of things. And while you might be a resident, you charge at home majority of the time. And if you're on a long trip, yeah, you stop out of a DC3 charger and you're paying 40 cents per kilowatt. But for the most part, you're paying 11 cents from home to charge on a level 2 while you're sleeping anyway. Yeah.
I'm really curious about the battery aspect of it. So at 5 years, you may or may not have had to replace the battery in those cars, right?
My personal experience, the batteries have always been under warranty. Never had to replace one ever. And I have over 200,000 miles on a Model S Tesla right now.
I'll just add, there are a lot of questions about battery use, recycling. I did see a story yesterday that car batteries are being repurposed for solar microgrids in California because they don't need that kind of load. So I think it's a great example of how we can kind of reuse this and provide better resilience for when we have power outages.
All right, we got another question back here.
Yeah, I was here about 2 or 3 years ago, and there was a presentation on, I don't know if it was city of Orlando or the county-wide, but 6,000 school buses being converted to electric buses. And I don't, you probably remember that. I'd like to know what happened, because I heard that infrastructure was big problem with transformers and everything in the space, that because all the buses needed to be charged at the same time, pretty much.
I'm actually not familiar with that project. I do know that there is quite a bit of federal money for fleet transition. So I don't know if anybody knows about.
Kurt, I'll jump in. I know, I don't know about that particular example, but in Montgomery County, Maryland, just successfully completed a photovoltaic powered microgrid to power their buses, and it's an equivalent number of buses. And they did that because financially, it was a stronger business case, and it didn't have the lead time of permitting and working with the utility. So it's pretty much a standalone microgrid, islanded, that can connect to the utility as needed. So I think that was early, a few years ago. But now we're really starting to see that, and school buses, garbage trucks, perfect use case for EVs.
If I may add to that, in addition to the microgrids, battery storage, the same way battery storage has proven to be a great addition to solar farms, because now they can sell or resell the electricity when the consumption is high and the cost of a kilowatt hour is higher. Battery storage has also been a great solution to lower the stress on the electric grid when we are adding several DC fast chargers for public transportation, because you don't need to draw that much power at any given time. Actually, you charge directly from a battery that is stationary battery that is slowly being charged while it's not being in use. So actually, that's how you manage that at the same time.
There are really fascinating developments happening in that area. Not only battery storage, but Florida Power and Light, in fact, has their lab where, for example, they are piloting some flywheel charging, so that for a fast charger, you don't need the permitting and all the infrastructure to bring that 480 volt line to that DC fast charger. It will be just perhaps a 110 or a 220 line to the flywheel, and the flywheel charges up and then discharges its energy only when you need to actually do your charging.
One more thing I do want to add to that is that we are also currently working on a new policy for, it's called V2G, which is vehicle to grid. A lot of your vehicles, especially your larger vehicles like your school buses, like Jim was talking about, can actually be a storage component for microgrid. So in the event we have an event like a hurricane and we have to utilize our schools for a security safety site for people to go into, you could actually power that school off of the bus. So and if you're powering it off solar and you're powering it throughout the day when the sun is out or the wind is blowing or whatever, you can store it in the bus or store it in the microgrid or a virtual power plant, so to speak, and then actually be able to go back into your business, your school, your home through the virtual power plant and our V2G. And there is a software out there that actually is called AutoBidder that actually tempers when you turn it on and when you turn it off, so you're not draining your vehicle at a given time when you need it the most, but you only give to the grid when there's peak power needs.
We're just about out of time, so I'd like to ask our panelists: are there any points you'd like to touch on that we've forgotten? Go ahead.
Well, no, actually V2G, I was just about to mention that, so thanks for adding. I mean, that's where the future is going in this business, in this technology, is the possibility to install bi-directional chargers and offer those drivers the possibility also to resell a portion of the excess storage or power stored in the batteries back to the grid at a profit. So let's say that you can charge at 20 cents per kilowatt in the morning, and then you resell a portion of that power stored in your battery back to the grid during the times of peak energy consumption. So that actually allows drivers to offset a portion of their fueling cost, providing an additional incentive for people to drive electric.
Mm-hmm. And I will add also that electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles now have added the componentry of being kind of like a mobile iPhone. So they're really data collectors. And as you might have heard now, data is the new oil. And because we live here in Central Florida, we have a lot of data collectors around here. And as we get this urban economy kicked off, like Kurt was saying, we get these 60 million people a year coming through our airports, coming to our conferences, coming to our theme parks. We are collecting all that data through this, through Verizon, through T-Mobile, through AT&T. We collect all that data of how people move throughout our city. And we can sell that data because we have an onslaught of 60 million people a year to external companies, to external municipalities. And that's an additional revenue stream for our airport, for our rental car associations. Hertz just bought a bunch of Teslas. So data, new oil.
All right, Glenn, I've got one last question. Dick,
One
this is
quick
it.
question, maybe this is directed to Kurt. You put up some numbers there that I think it was 7.5 billion that's going to be allocated to federal money coming for infrastructure, for charging infrastructure, and then you had a couple other. Give us a little more details on how that's going to be allocated. I'm presuming this is coming out of the overall major infrastructure bill.
Correct.
But and you mentioned that some of this is going to go to some private companies and so forth. Wouldn't the government contract with whoever is
Yeah,
going
so
to be building this infrastructure and so forth? To kind of explain that a little better.
Okay, I'll try to break it down. So out of the 7.5 billion, Florida will get almost 200 billion over the next 5 years. And that can cover what are called eligible costs. Working with private industry is considered an eligible cost, so they can work through government in order to access that. So it's kind of the difference, I would say, between DOT building a bridge or hiring a contractor to build the bridge. So that's how there's a little bit of flexibility. Alejandro said, he's got an incentive to keep this up and running because he makes money through it. So it's, whereas a state agency with no experience doing this could have a tougher time with the user experience. So I think that's where it's great that it provides a lot of flexibility. This is still evolving. They haven't actually let the bids yet. So you just have to keep an eye on it. But it's good to know that there is significant funding out there for this opportunity.
I certainly learned an awful lot from each and every one of our speakers today. So please join me in just thanking them for being here today.